Hello and welcome to another News Coolum video. I've received some requests to do a 50,000 mile update on my Bull TV, and so I decided to go ahead and do this video now as a driving video, but I also received some additional feedback that the last time when I did a 36,000 mile update, that the video was a little long and people just wanted sort of a concise version of it. So I'm just going to give you guys just the high level review right now, and there'll be a much longer, more detailed review to follow. Now, just up front, because this seems to be the $37,000 question, no, I have not noticed any battery degradation in the Bull TV so far. So after 50,000 miles, if there's any battery degradation at all, it's not really noticeable. It would be less than 1%. And that's after dozens of DC fast charging sessions and, again, 50,000 miles of driving and a number of different climates, including extremely hot temperatures during the summer, well over 100 degrees. Now, beyond that, though, just in terms of cost of ownership, it's actually been extremely low. For the DC fast charging that I've done on my long distance trips, I figure I'm averaging about 5 cents to 6 cents per mile uh, trip costs. And for local driving, it's closer to about 2 cents a mile with my local work charging. Now, again, your prices will vary. That's not necessarily going to be representative of what everybody is going to see. In addition to that, in the 50,000 miles, I have not once taken it to a service center. I'm still running the original software. In fact, my software is old enough that the over-the-air updates do not actually work at this point in time. I'd need to take it to the service center to update it. But I'll probably wait on that just a little while longer because, frankly, I haven't had any issues that haven't been solved by a basic restart of the system. I did put on the Cruise Eco rims, which required me to go have the tires pulled and put on the new rims. And I've rotated my tires myself. But other than that, that's pretty much been it in terms of maintenance. So the last 50,000 miles have been extremely worry free. I'm still on the stock tires, and they look like they're going to last at least until maybe 60 to 70,000 miles. Now, if you're interested in hearing my more detailed review of the Bull TV and my feedback for GM on what they can improve and what they can do differently, maybe improving this car, but also for all of their future EVs, please stick around for the longer video to follow. And if you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe. It helps out the channel. And for those of you who want to hear my more detailed opinions, well, just hang around. The thing about 50,000 miles is it seems like a important milestone for some people, but it really isn't that big of a deal in terms of ownership, right? You hit 50,000 miles and it's not like there's scheduled maintenance. It's not like it's a typical point at which you would need you'd be ending a lease or anything of that nature. So it's just sort of an arbitrary milestone. And I had already provided a 36,000 mile update because I felt like that was a fairly important milestone for a lot of the people who were leasing. And not a whole lot has actually changed since I did that 36,000 mile update. I've gone a few other places, I've done a few more things, but really my experience with the Bull TV hasn't changed. I'm still on the original stock software, even though apparently at this point over-the-air updates are available. I just have such an old software that I would first need to have it updated at a dealership, at which point they would do the patch that I would get over the air anyway. So I haven't made the time to do that, and I'm not sure that I'm actually inclined to right away. And the reason for that is, if something's not broken, why would you fix it? And in the case of my Bolt EV, I don't think that anything is broken. I've had a few screens freeze up here or there. My Android Auto is letterboxed, but none of those things are really that big of a deal to me. Also, 50,000 miles, I'm still on the stock tires. Really, the only maintenance that I've done is I've filled up the window washer fluid, and I'm probably going to need to fill it up again. Yes, it holds an entire gallon, and I'm going to need to continue to rotate the tires. But really, that's about it. I might need to change my windshield wipers, and I'm probably going to change the cabin air filter soon. But that's pretty much the limit of what I need to do in terms of maintenance. And that's sort of the point, I think, that I have after 50,000 miles of owning and driving this car, is it's kind of amazing how little you think about it. And what I mean by that is refueling this car, it's just happens. You don't really consciously think about it. I don't have charging at home. I charge at work. And so for me, I just show up at work and I plug in and I do my work day and I go home with a full battery, or I drive wherever it is I need to drive. So there's no going to gas stations, there's no going out of my way to refuel. The only times that happens is on long trips. As I drive along, these roads, you start to forget that you're driving. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One pedal driving essentially means that all you do is you modulate the speed of the car using a single pedal. So you're sort of controlling everything in terms of your acceleration and your steering input, but it's so effortless that it doesn't really seem to make that big of a difference, right? When I get done driving, I'm relaxed, which is nice. There's no the car itself just sort of fades into the background, and you're free to experience everything else. And I know people who drive internal combustion vehicles, they really like the fact that they're engaging with their car. In the Bolt EV, you're still engaging with your car, but you're also engaging with everything else. So with an internal combustion vehicle, you're drowning out your environment. And with the Bolt EV and other EVs, you hear the road, which some people say, well, you don't want to hear anything at all. Maybe if you want to be in a muffled cabin, car cabin, but really you can hear your tires, you can hear the road, you can hear the other vehicles on the road, you can hear wildlife. One of the things that I enjoy most about driving this vehicle is going up into national forest, where you can hear the birds chirping, you can hear the animals in the trees, you can hear the wind blowing. When it's raining, you're actually experiencing the rain, and so those are all sort of the things that I've really come to enjoy about driving an electric vehicle, and in particular the Bolt EV. It's almost like you're reconnecting with your environment. People ask about things like, how is your battery life? Well, I haven't noticed any battery degradation at all. So just coming up over this hill, I'm down to 189 miles of medium estimated range, or now back up to 190. And that's after only charging to 90% using Hilltop Reserve Mode, which I do recommend, by the way. If you don't need the miles, so if you're not going on a long trip, just keep it in Hilltop Reserve Mode. And in fact, even when you're going on a long trip, unless you know that 10% of your battery is going to make a difference in the initial leg of your trip, I might keep it on Hilltop Reserve Mode anyway. Even when you're DC fast charging, the likelihood that you're going to need to DC fast charge past 90% is very, very low. So it might be possible that you just always want to leave it on Hilltop Reserve mode just to preserve battery life that much more. Hilltop Reserve mode, I think, is something that probably everybody should be using. The other reason for that is it also makes your regenerative braking more consistent, so you have one pedal driving available to you basically at all times. I have some suggestions for GM. I hope they take them to heart, because these are things that I feel like they should be doing with all of their electric vehicles moving forward, and many of them are software driven, things that I feel like they could do retroactively to existing electric vehicles. I think there's a simple safety thing that GM should consider doing. Right now, if you brake regeneratively beyond about 0.2 Gs, I believe is the trigger point, the brake lights will come on. Well, when you come to a stop in one pedal driving, I think GM should really seriously consider making the brake lights come on automatically, even if your foot's not on the brake pedal. Now, I tend to put my foot on the brake pedal anyway, out of a habit and out of safety, but you don't have to, and that leaves a small portion of the time where you might be completely stopped and your brake lights aren't on. And when that happens, it does create something of a safety concern. The battery on the Bolt EV is thermally managed, and it can both heat and it can cool, right? But there's nowhere on our display where it shows what the battery's actual temperature is. Now, one of the displays that GM provides for the Bolt EV, it's a carryover from the Volt, and it shows your battery on the infotainment screen. It shows what your capacity is. It shows where the energy is going, if it's going to the wheels, if it's coming from the wheels going back to the battery, that sort of thing. And it's kind of cool to show kids or whatever. It gives you sort of a visual of what's going on, but it doesn't really provide a whole lot of information. That's a perfect display for them to provide information, one, about the battery temperature, but two, about the power input and output from the battery. Something that I think GM should consider is giving owners a little bit more control over the functionality of their electric vehicles. And the first thing is that battery temperature. One is seeing what the temperature is, but two is actually being able to control when the battery heats and when the battery cools. And the reason for that is, for those of us who are in colder climates, it's really nice to be able to say, I know I'm going to be DC fast charging in 5 or 10 minutes. I know my battery temperature is below the threshold where I would see ideal, optimal charging rates. Let me hit a button that preconditions the battery. Yes, it uses energy. Yes, you can have a warning that pops up that states using this will reduce your driving range. But I should be able to know what my driving range is, and I should be able to press that button, warm up my battery, so when I pull into the DC fast charger, I'm already charging at the fastest rate possible. Likewise, for those of us in hot climates, we should be able to cool the battery preemptively down to ideal charging rates. Now, outside of that, there's one other thing I think GM should do. They've stated that they sort of dummied down the Bolt EV's charging rates, and they basically acknowledged that the Bolt EV can charge faster than what they're allowing, but they've sort of nerfed it, if you will. And based on all the reports we've read, and this is something that's been coming out of the new 350 kilowatt, and I guess right now there are only 150 kilowatt live stations in Chicopee, out in Massachusetts, where Electrify America installed those new fast chargers. The Bolt EV, yes, is charging at about 56 kilowatts up to, that 55% cutoff. Well, that's nice, but I think you should be able to give owners the option that they can enhance their charge rates. And what I mean by that is you should have a button just like what you have toggling between 8 amps and 12 amps for the level 1 AC charging. You should give the owners the option to activate a ultra fast DC charge rate. There can be a warning, there could be limits, there could be a point where it's only allowed for, certain conditions. But once it's allowed, it ups the amperage from the current 150 amps of charging capacity to 200 amps of charging capacity, maybe up to the same 55% cutoff. And to make it maybe more usable with the current infrastructure, rather than throttling down to 100 amps at 55%, maybe they allow that 125 to 150 amp rate to persist until 70, 75, or possibly even 80% battery. So allowing Bolt EV owners to determine whether or not they charge up to 80% in, say, 30 to 40 minutes, depending on how fast the chargers are, I think that would be a very powerful tool. And I think it's something that should be used moving forward for other electric vehicles. There are other factors, too, that might want to consider. Things like ACC, the adaptive cruise control. A lot of people ask about that as an option. And I think it should be provided, possibly maybe as Super Cruise, but that would be a very expensive add-on. But hey, look at Tesla right now. If you order a $35,000 Model 3 and you want their enhanced autopilot with eventually their self-driving software, that's $8,000 that they're adding on. The Super Cruise that's available with the HD mapping is very effective. If that's profitable at a $5,000 rate, then maybe it's worth providing. So that's something to consider. Yes, the Bolt EV's price would start to balloon up and up and up, but again, those people who want it might appreciate that $5,000 option. There should be an option for a more plush interior. Now, I wouldn't opt for that option, but I recognize that, hey, these seats are fairly narrow. They're not necessarily well padded, right? I have the cloth seats, and to me, they're soft, they're fine. The people who sat in my car haven't had any complaints. The seats seem to be perfectly comfortable for them. But on longer trips, yes, they're a bit narrow, and the padding is not as thick as it could be. A $1,500, $2,000 option to upgrade these seats to the same seats as are in, say, the Encore, I believe it is, where they have power seats, power adjustment, adjustable lumbar. They're fairly close to the same width, it feels like, but they are more cushioned, and they're a little bit thicker. Those seats, yes, you're going to sacrifice some things in terms of leg room for rear passengers, but if that's a trade-off that someone who's buying this car wants to make, well, it's a trade-off that you should allow them to make. With that software update, the MP4 playback while the Bolt EV was in park, that's since been removed. And yeah, I could see how that would bother some people. I do feel like there should be some sort of media playback option for the Bolt EV, even if it's integrating it with with some sort of streaming video, right? Where you get contracts with Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or whatever, and those apps will allow videos to be played over the screen when certain conditions have been met. I could see a justification for that as well. Some other things too. There's a hack that someone did recently where they added a LED treatment around the charging point. I do agree something like that does need to happen for the Bolt EV. Something where, you know, when you're charging in a dark location, you can actually find the charging port, plug it in. Truthfully, though, that's become less of an issue recently. There are still a few locations where if you show up at nighttime, you're not going to be able to find your plug port because there are no lights on the parking lot, and that could cause some issues as well. Now, overall, in terms of, you know, the interior of the Bolt EV, mine is holding up, I would say, fairly well. The hard plastics all seem fairly durable. You know, since the 36,000 mile update that I gave, the only real issue that I've seen with the cloth seats are, I think my driver's seat is starting to discolor a little bit with the, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fabrics and dyes from like various pants or whatever, because it is a light fabric, and that is starting to, you know, show a little bit of the dyes from my pants, and I'll need to see if just shampooing that will get it out, because the material that they used feels a lot like denim, and you know, from that it's here we go, going on up to, oh hi. Yeah, it does feel a bit like denim, so if it stains, hopefully it's something that can just shampoo out. One of the things that I got to do recently is drive a few more electric cars that I've never driven before. One of them was a Tesla Model X, and another is a VW e-Golf. So I'm starting to gather, I think, more experiences in terms of various electric vehicles, how they drive, and it's giving me a better basis of comparison for the Bolt EV. I had the choice basically of buying the Bolt EV or buying the Tesla Model S60, the one that was software locked, that you could pay for the update to get a Model S75. And I chose the Bolt EV, and part of that was based on its size. Given where I lived, it would be really, really difficult to fit a Model S in my parking space, and I wouldn't want to have to deal with that. And also, given where I live in Northern California, it seems, well, it seems like a bit rural for something like a Model S. The dirt roads, the gravel, yeah, I can see myself doing things in the Bolt EV that I would never do in a Model S. So the new Nissan Leaf, I drove that. My experiences with the driving dynamic compared to the Bolt EV, even if the 2018 Nissan Leaf were a 60 kilowatt hour battery pack that was thermally managed, they went with the LG Chem, they gave it the 150, 160 kilowatts that they were talking about. Even if all of those things had happened, if they would have implemented the driving characteristics the same way, I would not have picked the Leaf over the Bolt EV. It's just when you have to drive the car every day, the driving experience in that car left me wanting more. Now, the e-Golf that I drove recently, I feel very, very similarly. Now, there were things that the e-Golf did, I think, better than either the Bolt EV or the Nissan Leaf, but it's severely underpowered, to the point that I found it a little bit nerve-wracking, actually, driving it, because I just didn't know whether I had the power that I wanted, when I needed it. And of course, there's the other issue of the range. It just would not suffice. Now, I didn't get it to drive it long enough to see the experiences of it fast charging, but it also charges significantly slower, and that's also something I don't know that I would have wanted to deal with. And like the Nissan Leaf, apparently after Rapidgate, there's also the issue that it's doing this to sort of protect the battery because of a lack of thermal management. So there are a lot of issues that I have with the e-Golf. Otherwise, I don't need that plush of an interior. That's not a priority for me. For some people, maybe it is. But beyond that, it's also just, it was just very underpowered. I didn't like the responsiveness of it, the steering inputs of it, the handling. All of those sort of just left me cold. But the Model X, that's another comparison, and it's a much more expensive, much more powerful vehicle, but because of the way the accelerator was set up, it didn't feel faster. Now, I mean, I know it is, and I know that in my particular case, I was driving it around with 800 extra pounds of humans in it, but it didn't feel as fast, or at least as quick, and it didn't feel as nimble. So I'd have to actually go back and see what some of the numbers are, but also I think if it were, say, like a P90 Model X, Ludicrous or whatever, then maybe it would have been a little bit different. But the one that I drove, I actually just didn't care for how the accelerator felt. And I'm the one who's driving around in sport mode all the time. Now, the thing I liked about the Model X, and the thing that the Bolt EV just doesn't have, is the autopilot. And the autopilot for the Model X is just so much more intuitive and so much more advanced than Nissan's ProPilot that the two aren't even comparable. Now, again, the Bolt EV doesn't even have adaptive cruise control, but if it were to have some sort of driver assist, I would much rather have it be like the Tesla Autopilot than the Nissan ProPilot. Unfortunately, Hyundai is still only selling the Hyundai Ioniq EV in double-digit numbers in the United States, and even though I put out several inquiries to dealerships to let me know when they had them in, I've never received a response. So I haven't had a chance to drive that vehicle. I would really like to see how it varies in experience from the Bolt EV. But so far, the vehicles that I've driven, especially if price were no matter, if price wasn't an issue, I can't see how I would pick any of them over the Bolt EV. So basically, if I had $1 million to spend on any electric vehicle I wanted, I'd have a hard time choosing any of them over the Bolt EV. it seems strange to say. Now, the Model 3, I think, is a little bit different, and hearing the experiences of those owners, yes, even the owners coming from a Model S say that the Model 3 is a far superior driving experience, and I could see why. So hopefully, I'll get to have some of those experiences myself soon, and sort of see how that plays out. After driving all of those other electric vehicles, the e-Golf, the new Nissan Leaf, the Tesla Model X, the old Nissan Leaf, I have no regrets about getting the Bolt EV. It in my opinion, it just drives better than all of those other vehicles. It's just a better driving experience. I'm very, very happy with my decision. I think this car fits my needs well, and I like the way it drives. And I don't want to sound like a GM apologist, because again, I do feel like there are many things that GM could do better with this car and with future electric vehicles, but I also feel a bit like this car was made specifically for me. After owning the 2012 Chevy Volt for a while, a poll popped up, and it was quizzing owners, essentially polling them and saying, what do you want the next GM electric vehicle to be? And an overwhelming majority of respondents to this poll fell into one of two camps, and it was basically equally distributed between those two camps. The first said, we want a Volt with longer battery range and better fuel economy on the internal combustion range extender. Well, a couple years later, GM released the 2016 Bolt, which had a longer electric range and better efficiency on the internal combustion range extender. But the other group, what they asked for very specifically was a 200-mile crossover EV, hatchback crossover EV. I was in that latter group. So it appears that GM responded to that owner survey, and not only responded, they responded to both the requests. So they made the Volt people were asking for, and they made the Bolt EV, which is a 200 plus mile all-electric crossover vehicle. I got what I asked for. So it's really hard for me to complain, because GM did exactly what half of the Volt owners at the time asked them to do. Now, again, there are things they could improve. Again, there are things that they could do better. But it's kind of hard to go wrong when you do exactly what your customers ask you to do. And not only that, when you exceed all of their expectations.